In this video, I cover 10 acrylic painting tips for beginners. I demonstrate some of these tips in the video by painting this landscape painting, and some of those tips include the type of substrate you can paint on, such as paper or canvas, the benefits of toning canvas before you paint on it, the different ways that you could sketch out your composition before you paint, and much more. So stick around. My first tip is to practice painting on paper or canvas boards or canvas panels. And the reason for that is, as a beginner, you're going to make a lot of mediocre paintings. I mean, it's just a fact that it takes a while to get good at painting. So it really doesn't make sense to use a stretch canvas because they're expensive and they take up a lot of space. If you ever try to use acrylics on like sketchbook paper, you'll know that it buckles pretty bad from the moisture. But they do make acrylic paper, and I use it for painting finished paintings or even just for practice. And it's thicker and it has a sizing on there which prevents the moisture from being absorbed into the paper too much. And so it doesn't really buckle. You can tell these two paintings here, they dried perfectly flat and they have a nice texture to it. This brand here has like a cold press watercolor texture to it, and then Strathmore makes one that has more of a canvas texture if that's what you prefer. Another option is to use canvas boards, and there's different types. Here's two studies I did, the flowers. And the one of the white rose is on a cheaper cardboard type canvas panel, and then the pink rose is on, this is Masonite or like hardboard, and it has canvas glued to it. And this will be much more durable. I have a video on how to frame canvas panels, so if you're interested in that, you can watch that next. Tip number 2 is to use a palette that's made for acrylic paints. Now you might get one of these wood palettes with like a small tabletop easel, and they work good for oils because the oils stay wet and you can scrape them off before it really has a chance to dry. If you use this for acrylics, it's just going to dry in there very rapidly because the wood will absorb the moisture, and then when you go to mix colors on top of that, it'll be really lumpy and it won't be a good experience. What I recommend is one of these peelable palettes. It's made from a type of plastic that acrylic paint won't stick to, so when the paint dries on there, and if it's thick enough, you could just peel it off with your fingernail and just peel it right off. Or if it's thinner, you could just wash it off with a wet rag. Warm water helps. You can let it soak in warm water to soften it up and it'll just scrub right off. So this is just generally a lot easier in terms of like housekeeping in your studio. So this is what I recommend. Tip number 3 is to use a limited palette. Now the word palette can refer to the surface that you're mixing on, but it has an additional meaning, which is the selection of colors. And a limited palette means exactly what it sounds like, is that you use fewer colors. In this painting, I'm using 5 colors plus white, and those colors are Hansa Yellow Opaque, Cadmium Orange, Quinacridone Magenta, Ultramarine Blue, and Phthalo Blue Green shade. And that's in addition to Titanium White. These are the colors I would normally recommend, except for I would exchange the Cadmium Orange with a red, maybe Pyrrole Red or Naphthol Red, any bright red that you want to use. The reason why I'm switching it out is because this painting does not contain very much red, but it does contain orange, and I want the opacity of this cadmium orange. I know it's tempting to go into an art supply store and become inspired by all those beautiful colors, and you want to buy 20 tubes of paint. I've been there. I have a big collection of colors, but usually I restrict my palette down to 6 or 7 colors. Tip number 4 is to choose an acrylic paint that works with your style. So you have heavy body acrylics, which are probably the most common, and they're about as thick as oil paint. You can use them to create textures and it'll retain the bristle marks of your brush. This is Golden Ultramarine Blue, and that's heavy body acrylic, but they also make fluid acrylics, which are thinner. You can get a much flatter coat of paint on the canvas or on the paper. Golden describes it as having a thickness of heavy cream, but there's also soft body acrylics made by Liquitex, and this is their Cerulean Blue. It goes on pretty smooth and it'll dry without any bristle marks. If you need an acrylic paint that's even thinner, they make acrylic ink. Now Golden has high flow acrylic, which is great for making fine lines. It flows right off the brush. But you can also use it for painting in a watercolor style because it's so thin to begin with. You can use it straight from the bottle. You can also add a little bit of water to make it flow a little bit more like watercolors. So I'll add some of this red in here, and it starts to spread right into those other areas. You could use this on paper or on canvas. You can also load up a acrylic pen with a high flow acrylic and use that to draw fine lines. So if you like the soft body acrylics, but you don't like the satin finish, you can try acrylic wash. And that has the same smoothness, but it dries to a very flat finish, which simulates the look of traditional gouache. And aside from these types of acrylics, there's also open acrylics, which dry at a much slower rate. So there's a lot more options than just using, the cheapest student grade acrylics. Tip number 5 is to sketch out your composition before you start painting. And the reason why I recommend that you draw out your composition is that it's much easier to fix mistakes in the drawing stage than it is in the painting stage. So I have a gesso board here, and that's another option I forgot to mention, was that gesso board is just like a masonite with a coat of gesso on there, and it's smoother than canvas, so it's kind of good to sketch on. I have a 2H pencil, which I like to use because it's a harder graphite and it doesn't smear as much when you paint over it. So I'm going to start by just sketching out some of the basic shapes. So this is a landscape, and I'm just drawing like where the tree line should be, and this is some water here, and there's a few trees. And maybe I'll indicate like where the clouds go, maybe just the basic shape of it. That's about all you really need, especially for a landscape painting. Something that's more intricate, you might actually have to like get the shapes a little bit more accurate. But in a landscape, if the proportion of your tree is off a little bit, most people don't notice. So it helps to back up and take a look at your drawing to get a better view of it, and just look for mistakes in like the size of the different shapes and the placement of them. I think I'm pretty happy with this. Tip number 6 is to tone the canvas. And I'm just using some burnt sienna. I'll just squeeze it on the gesso board, and I have some water on my brush to thin it out a little bit. So the whole point of this is that they're getting rid of the stark whiteness of the canvas or the paper. And that helps you to judge colors better. If you have a dark color against that stark white, it's going to look too dark. And the other thing too is it's a psychological advantage where I think a lot of beginners are afraid of like making mistakes, and you have to learn that you can cover over acrylics pretty easily. And this also just gets rid of all the white. A white canvas can be intimidating, so it helps to get rid of it. So another advantage of toning the canvas is that when you paint two shapes next to each other and you leave a little gap between there, you won't have a white gap. You'll have a little bit of color showing through. And some artists do that on purpose just so you have like a warm glow around some objects, but even if that's not your intention, like if you just overlook that little gap, it won't look like it's unfinished. When you have those little white gaps in there, it looks like you didn't finish the painting. Some of my pencil lines sort of vanished, but it's not a problem, and I'll show you why next. You can use a rag just to lighten some of it up. I didn't want it that dark, but some of these pencil lines probably aren't visible on the video, and some of the lighter ones did disappear, but another option for sketching out your composition is just to use your brush. I really recommend this for beginners because it helps to learn how to like draw with your paintbrush. I think painting is mostly drawing with color, and it just gives you more confidence in just like putting in shapes and putting paint down on the canvas. So here's the basic shape of the trees, and that's where the cloud was in the water, and here are the trees on the other side. So just in a matter of like a minute, I have like the basic landscape mapped out. I could even put the tree back in a little bit. I want this to dry thoroughly, so I might take a hairdryer to it so I can paint over it without lifting it. Tip number 7 is to learn how to control the drying times of acrylics. Now I just mentioned that I used a hairdryer to make this layer of burnt sienna dry faster, and that'll prevent it from lifting as I paint over it. Now if you want to make your paints dry slower, you can add retarder to it, but I like to use open acrylics because the retarder is already built into it. And when you learn how to control the drying times, you have much more control over how long you can blend your paint while it's on the canvas, and you can also force it to dry faster so you can paint wet over dry, which is an advantage at some times. So you'll see me doing that throughout this painting. Tip number 8 is to learn the basics of color mixing. It's really frustrating if you're in the middle of a painting and you can't match a color, so I recommend that you practice matching colors just by themselves. And you'll see some of my short videos, I match the color of leaves and some other items. And you could probably pick up some pointers just by watching those. I also have a color mixing playlist that you can check out. I have like a full-length video where I demonstrate how to match different colors. Tip number 9 is to experiment with different blending techniques. Acrylics are known for being difficult to blend, and I did an entire video that demonstrates a variety of ways that you can blend acrylics. I also did a separate video that shows you how to blend acrylics like oils so you can get smoother gradients and things like that. You'll probably find that there's one or two types of blending that work better for your style than others, so I recommend that you try different ones. Tip number 10 is to mix your colors a little bit lighter than what you anticipate. And the reason for this is because acrylic paints dry darker, and I saved this tip for last because it's more of an advanced technique. You might not notice it when you first start out, but eventually you'll notice that you'll come back to a painting and you'll notice it's a little bit darker than when it was wet. The reason for this is that the acrylic emulsion is cloudy when it's wet, but it clarifies as it dries. So that makes it look a little bit lighter when it's wet. Now, what I normally do is I'll mix my color and then I make it just a little bit lighter by adding white or some other lighter color to it. So those are my 10 acrylic painting tips for beginners. I hope it helps you out with learning how to paint with acrylics. Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe, and here are more videos and playlists that you can check out.